Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Cedarville Stories Podcast. I'm Mark Weinstein, and wasn't it a great weekend at homecoming with all the activities and the reconnection of relationships? Wow, homecoming is a special time at Cedarville. On today's podcast, I am talking with Brigadier General Todd Fogle, the 2024 Alumnus of the Year at Cedarville University. In college, Todd studied mathematics and physics and was in our ROTC program, and he was a student leader in the former Sword Bearers Music Ministry, which we will discuss today on the program. After graduating from Cedarville, Todd earned a master's degree from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and from the National Defense University. Todd and his wife, Johanna, have 3 children, and it's my pleasure to welcome Brigadier General Todd Fogle to this week's Cedarville Stories Podcast. So, Todd, congratulations on being named the Cedarville University Alumnus of the Year. And even though you have been presented with numerous awards in your military career, I have to believe being recognized by your alma mater brings some special meaning to you. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Cedarville holds a very special place in my heart and my wife's heart and in our family's heart. It's been a key part of our story over the years. And so to be recognized by our alma mater as the Alumnus of the Year, when there are so many others out there that are just as and more qualified for the award than I am, is certainly, number one, I'm honored by it. Number two, I'm humbled by it. It's just inconceivable to me that this is happening and that the university has deemed me worthy of the award. So yeah, it's pretty special.
Speak to the special bond that comes from being in the Cedarville family.
Mark, the special bond that I have with Cedarville is really twofold. Number one, it's the people that have had an impact on my life over the years. First, of course, I think of Dick Walker and his impact not only on me, but on the entire student body and on the entire university. Dick never failed to encourage me throughout my career. He was constantly sending me texts of encouragement. Stay the course was his thing.
Yeah. Yep.
And that encouragement really meant something. So Dick, and then Jim Cato, of course, and his impact on my life and his friendship for the past 30 years. So unfortunately, Dick passed away, but the opportunity to see those folks that meant so much to me. So that's really the first part of it. The second part of it is to be back on campus and see the things that are going on there. Mm-hmm. Johanna and I are really excited about the work that Dr. White has done over the last decade. And to see the direction that he is leading the school in, and to be part on some small scale through the former Alumni Council and now the Parent Leadership Council, being part of those, to hear directly from Dr. White on his heart for the college and his direction for the college, and to be inspired to see where he wants to take the college is really, really impressive, inspiring to us. And it's something that we are proud to be part of.
And I want to talk later on in the podcast about the Parent Leadership Council that you just referenced. And you just mentioned the name of Jim Cato. And candidly speaking, he was part of the main source of my research on you, because I know of the tight bond between the two of you. You wanted him to be in your wedding, I believe, but he couldn't make it. But that doesn't deter your friendship, for sure. As a student, you were part of the Sword Bearers ministry, and which Jim was really central there as well. And at one point, maybe early part of your tenure, you helped Jim draft policies for Sword Bearers, which is even still being used to this day with Heartsong. How did this opportunity present itself?
For whatever reason, saw something in me and took me under his wing pretty early on. So even my freshman year, I traveled with a team. And even during that year, Jim took me under his wing and, really chose to impact me and chose to invest in me and Johanna both, because Johanna and I traveled on the same team. As I look back on my Sword Bearer time, we used to refer to it as a Sword Bearer dating service, because several of us from that team ended up dating number one and then getting married number two. So it was just a great experience to travel with my future wife, and Jim saw that. And so Jim it wasn't that year that he and I sat down for some of this leadership development stuff. It was really in the subsequent years. He selected me to lead teams my sophomore, junior, and senior years. And so during that time, I had a lot of access to Jim and spent a lot of time with Jim. And he was gracious every second to continue investing in me over time. And I think he saw an inherent leadership ability in me that he chose to develop. And through the development of that, the two of us sat down really over the course of a weekend. We went down to the Dove Awards down in Nashville, and over the course of that weekend really sat down and kind of hammered out this binder that we intended to be a bunch of good ideas for team leaders, or a bunch of, you called it policy. For me, it was really more good ideas, because I didn't think I was in a place to be making policy. But, I helped Jim draft some of that and write some of that. And then, the two of us edited over time. And like you say, I think that still exists in some form, not completely, but in some form.
Correct. As
part of the team leader training manual for Heartsong teams today. And that's pretty cool to have been part of that, and to think that there is a chance that I had an impact on some of the teams even today.
Well, and speaking with Jim, I know you've had a big impact back then, as you still do today with the Heartsong teams. You mentioned Johanna and the dating service of sword bearers. It's kind of comical, but so was the opportunity to meet Johanna why you wanted to be in sword bearers? I need to ask that question.
No, heck no. I mean, I tried out for the team. I had sung in chorus and quartet all through high school. I thought I was pretty special. And so I thought I could make a team. And Jim right away put me in my place. I was trying out to be a bass because that's what I had sung all the time. And I got into the first try, and he's like, "You're a tenor, sing this tenor line." And I had no idea what that meant, because I'd never sung tenor in my life. And sure enough, he selected me as a tenor on that first team. Well, before he selected me, there were male callbacks. So he'd call back all the males, and we would go through singing parts and individuals and teams and those kinds of things. And of course, at that point, we needed a pianist to play the parts. And Johanna was the one that was playing the piano for the male callbacks my freshman year. So this is week one of my freshman year. And she's the only woman in the room. I'm confident that there's a whole bunch of guys that were looking at her, but she definitely caught my eye, and I chased her for the next several years, and happy to say that I won the battle. And we'll celebrate our 32nd anniversary in the coming weeks. And so it has been great. I traveled with her both my freshman and my sophomore year, and then she graduated in 90, 2 years before I did. So we didn't get a chance to travel the last 2 years, but the sword bearer team was definitely foundational and fundamental in building our relationship and the strong bonds that we have even today, 30 years later.
I understand that Johanna may not have been all that receptive maybe to dating you, because she didn't want to become a military wife. But yeah, that's what she became and has thrived in that. In fact, I understand she's had a tremendous impact with other wives of military leaders. Can you speak to her ministry and just her heart to care for others?
Yeah, you got it right. She was not excited about dating a military guy, and she could not conceive of the constant change and the constant moves and changes in locations. Her picturesque life was to marry a businessman and settle down in a city and live there for the next however many years they were married. And she was at the time dating a businessman, a person who would become a businessman. And so, I had to convince her that the military life was going to be okay. And somehow I was able to do that. I'm not sure, clearly it was me plus God, because I'm not sure I could have convinced her all by myself. She's to the point now, frankly, we've lived in this current house for 4 years, and she's to the point now where she's ready to rearrange the furniture or to go through the closets and go through the garage and those kinds of things. Because when you move every 2 or 3 years for 30 years, and then all of a sudden you spend 4 years in one place, you don't know what to do with yourself. It's time to move. It's time to do something to move. She, over the years though, particularly when I was in command of Air Force organizations, she took upon herself to be responsible for organizing the spouses of that organization. And so I led organizations from as small as 50 or 60 people up to 2,000 people. And so, the number of wives that she helped organize was pretty vast in some cases. And she was able to coalesce that unit to do great things, not just for the spouses, but for the members that were in the Air Force as well. She would organize charity events. She would organize social events. She would organize Christmas parties and, Halloween parties for the kids and this and that and the other thing. And there are wives today that still maintain contact with her and still reach back to her and tell her, not in so many words, but basically what a blessing she was to them during that time because of how much she chose to care for the wives in the organization.
You just spoke to the impact Johanna had with the wives of military people, but as the spouse, as the general, how does that impact your day-to-day life? Because when things are going well at home, things are good. How does she complete you, I guess, is maybe what I want to say.
Yeah, probably the best way I can say that is I would not have continued to progress in rank and responsibility in the Air Force if it hadn't been for her. There was no way I could have done the things that I did without the confidence that she was taking care of things at home. I have more deployments than I can possibly count. When you add it all up, the time that I have deployed to the Middle East is probably around 6 years since 9/11 happened. And so, 2 of those were year-long tours. The rest of them were anywhere between 4 and 9-month tours that I was gone. And during that whole time, she had to carry the burden of the home front. Early on, we made the decision for her to stay home and raise the kids. And, she took on the role of mom and dad during those times that I was gone. There was little impact that I could have at some points on things going on at home. Early on, people won't remember, but early on, there were no cell phones when I was deploying, and there was no way to call home every night and to have a conversation. And so you would try and call home once a week or maybe once every couple of days. And that was pretty difficult. And I had no idea, frankly, the amount of things that she was dealing with at home. Eventually, we got to FaceTime, and you can, the Wi-Fi is good enough generally, or the cell service, and you can call home pretty regularly. But it's hard to stay connected at home and understand all the things that she's dealing with. Probably the best example is she called me the night of my youngest son's birthday. It was back in 2014, and she called me, and it was the night of his birthday. And she basically led off the conversation with, "The neighbor's house is on fire." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool. How was Adam's birthday? Did he like his gifts?" It was just one of those cases where I had no idea of how this was impacting her and the family back home. And, what I didn't really remember is our houses at that point, we were crunched in DC, and we were 10 feet apart or something, the houses. And so the house next door on fire was impacting our house. It was melting the windows and the siding on our house, and they had to evacuate our house, and it was midnight, and it was snowing, and I could not grasp that from afar. And she was having to deal with all of that, taking care of the 3 kids, and what are we going to do for sleeping that night? And I was worried about how Adam liked his birthday presents, and it's just an indication of how much she has had to carry while I was deployed. And so the simple answer is, I've only been a general for 4 years. And so general's wife, she's awesome at it. But we didn't grow up that way, right? We started as the lieutenant's wife and the captain's wife and the major's wife and the lieutenant colonel and colonel's wife. And throughout all that time, she has borne the brunt of stabilizing our home and doing the mundane things and doing the really important things of raising our kids to be morally responsible adults and taking care of homework and soccer practices and all of those things. She's an amazing woman. And And it's been a great run, and I'm looking forward to the next 30 years.
So in reading your bio, I was talking with a colleague, Colonel Greg Thompson. He's a retired JAG officer with the Air Force. He now teaches criminal justice here at Cedarville. And I didn't really know what I was looking at. I mean, I saw a lot of words that didn't mean anything to me. So he kind of said, you should talk to him about this and this and this. And what he pointed out was just how impressive it is for someone to serve in special operations, how special it is to fly an MC-130 aircraft because of the gun and everything. He was kind of outlining that. And also to have a seat at the table with the most strategic military minds in our country through Checkmate. So I know you can't share a lot of details, but can you give us a glimpse of what it's like to be serving in special ops or flying that MC-130 or being with Checkmate?
I would say I've had the privilege to have some great assignments. If we want to talk about it later, it certainly points to God's direction and guiding and putting me where I needed to be over time so that I could continue to progress my career. Let me just back you up for a second. The primary aircraft that I did fly is the MC-130H Combat Talon 2. No gun on that one.
Okay.
The gun is on the AC-130. So my primary was the MC-130. It does low level, think 250 feet above the ground, infiltration, exfiltration, so putting people in and taking people out from behind enemy lines. We do airdrops of resupply to troops on the ground. We do helicopter refueling. I do have time in the gunship. I have flown the gunship. I have shot the gun. That's a lot of fun. It's awesome, but that's not the primary system that I flew in.
Okay.
Being in special ops was something that I aspired to for a long time. And it was kind of it's hard to say it's a pinnacle because it lasted 20 plus years. But that time that I spent in special ops was really the most special time in the military. Flying aircraft is something that I will never get tired of. And so, I have had the opportunity to do some really great things in the Talon, in the NC-130H. In Afghanistan, we were in Afghanistan in the fall of 2001. We were resupplying the Army Special Forces that were working with the Afghans that infiltrated from the north and the south, resupplying them with everything from beans and bullets to saddles for horses, and those kinds of things. And so that was really special. When Iraq came in 2003, I was privileged to be part of the first wave that went in there. And, on the opening night of Iraq, we did the longest ever low-level infiltration of troops behind enemy lines, where we infiltrated the soldiers from the 10th Special Forces Group all the way up into northern Iraq to present the Iraqis a second front, which they had to fight. And then, things like we were the first fixed wing into Baghdad airport after the Iraq invasion in 2003. And then really cool things like you survey a spot in the desert and you go airdrop some airmen into the desert, and they do a really quick survey to make sure that the desert is suitable. They give you a coordinate, and you come back 30 minutes later and land your aircraft on a random spot in the desert based on that set of coordinates that they had given you. And you set up this little mini operating base in the middle of the desert from which you can operate and influence the rest of the country. So really, really cool opportunities there. Checkmate was a really brief time that I was there. I was only there for about a year. It was developing policy, developing strategy for future military operations. And so it was really neat to see the genesis of a strategy all the way through to, the finalization of the strategy. And then years later, the employment of that strategy. That was pretty neat. I think, another pretty special time for me was my time that I got to serve on the commander, the 4-star commander of the Special Operations Command on his personal staff. And I was his executive officer and his commander's action group director. And so that meant I was his travel buddy and his note taker. And so everywhere that he went, I got to go with him and sit on the wall and take notes and listen to the conversations that he and the other 4-star commanders in our military were having. And it was hugely influential in my life to understand the thought process that these 4-star generals went through, and how they dealt with people and how they dealt with difficult situations and how they presented information that was unpopular, or, just all those different things. Each of those experiences had a pretty significant impact on me as a leader and me as a person as well.
So let's go back to the MC-130. I'm curious. So during those missions, or all the missions that you flew, did you ever feel like your life is in danger? Did you ever come across enemy fire or anything like that that made you really take special alert of the situation?
Yeah, several times that we came under enemy fire, some directly, some indirectly. Indirectly as you see stuff in the distance that does not impact you, but there are still people that are trying to hit you. They're just too far away to hit you. Some directly. The mission that I mentioned in the opening night of Iraq in 2003, that really long 5-hour infiltration of the troops on the northern front. There is a slide that I showed during my chapel speech last week that kind of speaks to it. It is, it's a graphic, and on this graphic, it's got Iraq and it's got a line of a route that we flew, and then it's got yellow and red dots all over the map. And each one of those dots was an enemy position we knew about. And so we would plan our route to avoid the enemy positions that we knew about. Unfortunately, there were more that we didn't know about. And, several times during that mission, we came under fire. And, at one point, it was continuous fire for 3.5 minutes, wow, which is almost unheard of. We practice aircraft maneuvers against enemy fire all the time, but when you practice them for 30 seconds, for a minute, maybe. A minute's a long engagement, right? And we were, in this particular case, we were engaged for 3.5 continuous minutes. And at the end of it, towards the very end of it, the co-pilot, throughout this 3.5 minutes, you've got 5 people in the cockpit yelling at the pilot to turn this way, don't turn that way, jink up, jink down, jink right, don't jink right. You got people yelling at the pilot trying to avoid what we see out there in the air in front of us. And at the very end, the co-pilot said, "They've got us."
Really?
So after 3.5 minutes, his comment is, "They've got us." So, all the stuff that we endured for 3.5 minutes didn't have that impact on him. But, that last barrage basically had the impact that he said, "They've got us." Thankfully, while we came home with several holes in the aircraft, they didn't bring us down, and we were able to continue the mission. That mission had 5 aircraft in the mission. 3 of them came back with holes in the aircraft. One of them was so severe they were unable to complete the mission and had to divert to, a recovery base. It's a testament to a couple of things. It's a testament to the skill of the pilots flying the aircraft. It's a testament to the training that we have. It's also a testament to the Lockheed C-130 and the sturdy workhorse that airplane is that brought us home after incidents like that. That's not the only time we were fired at. It's the only time that I came home with holes in the airplane. But there were several others that were significant, just none. That was probably the most significant that we had.
So you're flying the greatest aircrafts money can buy. But even greater than that, you're serving the one true God. How did you see the Lord bring you through these situations, and how did you see him during those situations?
Yeah, I think there's an adage that there are no atheists in the foxhole.
Right.
It's probably true in an aircraft under fire as well.
Yeah.
But for me personally, as we are reflecting on that in the moment, you are so busy with what's going on that you can't really sit down and take a break and have a conscious prayer. You've got these thoughts in your brain, oh Lord, protect us kind of things.
Sure.
But as you reflect on it afterwards, it is certainly, you look at the protection that he provided to me at that point and at other points in my career. It very, very clear protection. We had an aircraft full of equipment and soldiers in the back, and the fact that none of them were hit and none of them had a single injury as a result of all the aircraft maneuvers, of all the weapons that were firing at us. His protection was clearly evident on that. And just, not that it's a funny scenario, but when I came home, basically I told Johanna that if God can protect me in a situation like that, he can certainly protect me on a motorcycle. And so I bought a motorcycle for the first time after coming out. And she was actually, she was okay with it because, she understood God's protection and that he would still protect me even on a motorcycle here in the States. But you do see that throughout your time. And, my hope has always been that I would live my life differently enough from others, and folks would recognize that I had I lived differently. I had a different piece about me. I had a different moral compass about me, that folks would ask me about it and why I had that piece, why I had the different moral compass than others did. And that's, my witness was really my principal way of being a missionary to those that I was around. In the military, you would be aware that we're prohibited from really talking about religious things. As a commander or a senior officer, there are additional prohibitions against that sort of thing. But the one caveat is when you're asked specifically about something, you get a chance to answer the question honestly and faithfully. And so, it was always my desire to live in such a way that people would ask.
A lot of what you experienced in missions or in your missions, your flights, you would share with your wife. Did you keep much back from her to protect her?
There was a lot of things that over the years that I have either been unable to tell her because of the classification of the mission or the sensitivity of what we were doing. There is very little that at this point I haven't told her about, some of the dangers that I went through and some of the experiences that I have. She's a solid person, and I don't fear for her, but at some point there's no reason to burden her with some of the excessive details that I went through. You share the highlights of it, you try and share some of the emotions that you felt going through it. But some of the nitty gritty details, I just chose not to share with her because there was no reason to do that.
When I looked at your bio, I noticed that, you led the 492nd Special Ops Wing at Hurlbut Field. Was that a big deal for you in your career?
That was absolutely a big deal on a couple of fronts. Number one, that was my wing command. And in the Air Force, wing command is kind of a pinnacle event for most. Okay. There are 330,000 airmen in the Air Force. At any one time, there's about 75 wing commanders. And so it's pretty special in honoring to be selected to command a wing. Secondly, was the organization itself. The 492nd draws its heritage from World War II and the Office of Special Security, General Donovan's group, the OSS, which was a predecessor to the CIA and the Army Special Forces and others. The 492nd Special Ops Wing started as the 801st 492nd Bomb Group, which was part of the 8th Air Force out of England. They were known as the Carpetbaggers, and the Carpetbaggers of World War II were the air arm of General Donovan's OSS, and their mission was to fly agents into France to support the resistance in France against the Nazis. And so just a great heritage that comes from that wing, and the special operations heritage of that wing now to be part of this AFSOC, the Air Force Special Operations Command today. The other neat thing is one of the first things I did when I took command of that organization was travel to DC from Hurlburt Field. And I joined a bunch of OSS folks, including 24 carpetbaggers from World War II. These guys were ages 92 to 97. We were there to receive the Congressional Gold Medal, which is Congress's highest honor that they can give to an individual. I was honored enough to be able to receive a replica of that gold medal. And it's just a neat thing. This, on the back of this, it's all the operations, and predominant at the very top of the medal is carpetbaggers. You can't see it, but it says carpetbaggers there. And so these guys were great. True to form, we met in the hotel bar the first night, and they just wanted to tell their stories, and everybody in the bar was listening to their stories. And true to form, these aviators closed down the bar at the end of the night, and so it was just a pretty neat thing to be able to spend the time with them, to be able to be part of that heritage from World War II. And to listen to their stories from World War II, just Tom Brokaw's The Greatest Generation. It's an absolute fact. Those are amazing patriots, amazing Americans.
How did your role at Hurlburt and then that event you shared impact your leadership in your military career?
In that particular instance, I think what it did is made me want to connect the airmen of the current 492nd Special Operations Wing with the heritage of the carpetbaggers from World War II. And so we hosted a carpetbagger reunion, at which point, we invited carpetbaggers down for the reunion. We had a number of them for the reunion there. And the airmen of today's wing were able to spend time escorting and being around these heroes from World War II and hear their stories. And so it was really a desire to draw on the heritage of the unit, to connect to the airmen of today and draw that special operations heritage from World War II to the special operations heritage, the special operations current employment of special operations through the 492nd and what it is today. And just help them realize the high shoulders that we stand on, the high standards that were set before us, and the fact that we have a responsibility to bear that standard forward.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I firmly believe we are better off as individuals by knowing our history so that we can better serve our future. So thanks again for sharing that. Well, General Todd Fogle, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. And before we close, I have one final main question. So it goes to the point when I think this year there was a sword bearers reunion here in Cedarville, the village of Cedarville, I believe it was. And you're in Kuwait. You're serving in Kuwait, is what I was told, and unable to attend this special reunion. That's what everyone thought. But when Johanna went to the door and Jim came to the door and saw her, you surprised Jim because you were there. Tell us that story.
Yeah, pretty neat. It wasn't a sword bearers reunion. It was really Jim's retirement. His kids organized a retirement back in April, kind of a celebration weekend for Jim's retirement, even though his last day was August, I think. But they did a retirement celebration in April. And I was in contact with Celeste and Grayson, two of Jim's kids, and talking about what was going on and how I could participate. And we decided I could do a video, right? And I could send a video to kind of intro, a celebration and say, hey, and sorry I can't be there. As I look back in our friendship with Jim over time, I didn't want to look back and regret not being at his retirement ceremony. And so I kept working with the kids to figure out how I could surprise Jim coming in. And so Melody knew that Johanna was coming. Jim didn't know that Johanna was even going to come.
Okay.
He didn't expect her to come because I was out of town and she was occupied. And But Melody knew that Johanna was coming, and she was pretty excited by that. But the kids wanted to surprise both Jim and Melody with me being there. And so, the night before the celebration event, the kids had an event at Jim's house, and Johanna showed up at the door, and I was kind of hiding out of sight. And he was just completely blown away that she was there. And then I walked around the corner, and Jim's reaction is priceless. Celeste was able to get a video of it, and if you haven't seen the video, it's just a priceless reaction, and it just speaks to the friendship that Jim and I have had over the years. So that was pretty neat. I came home for a weekend, basically. I flew home from Kuwait. It was, I don't know, a ridiculous amount of flying to come home for a day and a half on the ground, but I felt it was worth it to do that, and it absolutely was.
Well, I know in talking with Jim, that was one of the first things he mentioned, because of just how important it was to see you. And another word that he has labeled you, and that is you're a man of great loyalty. And that event, you making the commitment to fly from Kuwait for that day really shows that loyalty, and it still means the world to him as I talked to him just last week. So what a great story. I do want to look for that video and see if I can find it. So my final question, Todd, is one of reflection. So when you look back on your military career, what are some takeaway lessons, and what are some faith-building experiences that you think fondly of as you are now exiting your role in the military?
I think that I have learned a couple of things from the Air Force. The military does a great job at developing people. We get lots of leadership training. We get lots of opportunity to be leaders. And so I think I hope that I have learned to be a good leader over time. And that's in both my formal leadership roles when I was a commander, but also in informal leadership roles. I'm a navigator, and so in the airplane, the aircraft commander is the pilot. And so oftentimes I outrank the pilot. I'm the person that has planned the mission. I'm the person that understands the mission the best, and I have to figure out how to informally lead that aircraft commander to successfully accomplish the mission. And that's just part of it. So I think one of the things that I learned, lessons learned, was leadership. I think I also learned about service to our nation. Oftentimes, particularly now, it may sound corny to some, but service to the nation is becoming rarer and rarer. Fewer and fewer people over time have a direct relationship with somebody who has served in the military or is currently serving in the military. And it's still a necessary thing. The military is not a perfect organization, but I'm hopeful that my participation now at the senior level, at the general officer level, has helped shape a little bit of at least my organizations and the direction that my organizations take and are continuing to take and have taken over time. So those are a couple of lessons. For faith-building experiences, I would say, certainly looking back at the protection like we talked about earlier, that certainly builds faith. I think another area is to see God's hand in my career. There's no way that I could have arranged the path that I took. And so very clearly there was a purpose and a plan for each of those steps. I will admit that I don't understand them all. There's still things that I don't understand why God put me on the path that I am on. Maybe someday I'll understand all that, right. But I don't. But that, I think the realization that I can't understand all those things helps build faith as well. And then I think, God's faithfulness, despite my disappointment, because there have been disappointing portions of my career. I didn't always get the assignments I wanted or the locations I wanted. I was not successful in securing a pilot slot to be a pilot in the Air Force. There were various disappointments that I've had over my career, but God's faithfulness to me throughout that has been pretty important to me and to my family to watch. There's a verse in Timothy that talks about, despite our unfaithfulness, he remains faithful to us. And I think that's true in my life.
Wow. Well, I am just in awe of the work that you've done for our country, the opportunities you've had to serve. I appreciate your transparency today on the podcast. Jim said that would be the case, and just really thank you for being a great ambassador for Jesus and Cedarville University. Congratulations on being the Cedarville Alumnus of the Year, and thanks for joining me this week on the Cedarville Stories Podcast. It was great to be with you.
Mark, thanks for the invitation. I'm honored, like I said, and humbled by the award from the university. And I look forward to hearing more of your podcast, number one, but also seeing the great direction and the great future for Cedarville going forward. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Blessings to you. I salute you. Thank you for listening to the Cedarville Stories Podcast, brought to you by Cedarville University. Be sure to come back next week when we'll share another Cedarville story for God's glory.